Good morning, good morning. Good to see all of you. If you find your seats, we'll start. Before we get into the talk, for those of us who are old timers, we know this, and for some of you, you know this probably instinctively. But I just really encourage you. We're in the summer season. This past week, man, I think it was in the 80s on the job. Didn't that feel fantastic? One of the reasons we want to do early, one of the reasons we start at 9:30 is to try to get you out of here because summer's short. Please enjoy the summer. It's going to be snowing soon enough, and you guys know that. All right. Oh gosh. All right, I'm done. I was at the reason I thought about this. I'm at a work. I was at the job this week, and I was laying a fireplace thing, and Waylon, some of you know him, Waylon Frederick walked up to me and said, "Do you know how long it is till preseason starts in football?" And I'm like, "Dude, are you kidding me?" But it's coming, and so man, enjoy the summer. I hope you get out and do some hiking, do some fishing. Just enjoy the summer, because it's going to be short, and we'll be back into the hoodie season forever. But for now, let's really do this. Hey, I'm going to be talking to you about becoming like Jesus, and let me just read a couple verses, and then I'll try to work through some real basic principles. So this is the one. We'll start here. For the Lord is the Spirit, and wherever the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. Man, don't ever forget that. That is what he is about. For all of us, and then this is the next verse. So that he starts at Paul in writing this. He starts with that idea. I mean, he moves into. Then this is how he follows it up. So all of us who have had that veil removed can see and reflect the glory of the Lord. Can see? Did you see it this week? And the follow-up question to how did you reflect that? And the Lord who is the Spirit makes us more and more like him as we are changed into his glorious image. And then this. For it is God who is at work in you, both to desire and to work for his good pleasure. Let's pray. Father, it's just so good to be here and just to be with this group of people. What a fantastic group of people you've brought here. And as we worship together and as we think about you wanting to reflect your glorious image in us and through us, help us to have a new appreciation for the work you do inside of all of us. And help us to see the longing of your heart for us. And God, help us to leave with just a new understanding and realization of just a little more of the big picture of what you've called us to be. In Jesus' name, amen. This is that talk that I occasionally wander back to. And it's because of this is the if so then why talk. It really is. Because in growing up, so I grew up I'm a lifer. I call myself a lifer, and that just means I grew up in the church. My dad was in church leadership, and so I was stuck with going to the Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday. Remember that stuff? Service and yeah. But then as I became a follower of Jesus, I always had this, if this stuff is actually true about me, then why? Because there seemed to be in my own life's journey this gap between what the Bible said about me. So when I'd read stuff like, you're more than a conqueror, you know what I could remember well? Last week. And what would circle back in my head was the time that didn't win. You're more than a conqueror. Really? How does that? And so this idea this morning is just this talk is really that question. So then why? Why is this battle so intense at times? To be like Jesus, if he's working, as this verse said, he's working in me. So I don't want to so much give you a process this morning as I just want us to think about some ideas related to this, and I'll try to work through this. So as I said, you can get out and enjoy the day. So here, I want to start here, and this is like the third time I brought this up, and I bring this up for this reason. Here's one of the traps I fell into, and I think this is really common for most of us. We tend to really. If you're here the first Sunday and haven't seen this, let me just tell you real quickly what this is about. This to me is some of the process of change. This is some of the levels, not so much the process, but the levels of change. And oftentimes we get stuck on the bottom too. That it just feels like that's where we need to start. So you find yourself, as we talked about last week, being in this kingdom of darkness, and you get transferred and you get brought into the kingdom of light, and you have this new position in this new place. And somehow that needs to change the oldness of who I am. And so the first thing I think about is, well, I got to change something. And it's easy to start with environment. And by the way, all of these levels of change are really, really important. I don't want to minimize any of them, but I do want to say that that environment is the lowest level of change you'll ever go through. So what that just simply says is, I got to change friends. I got to change, and we have all this, man, if I could get away from my church, if I could get away from the school I'm going to, maybe it's a coach that somehow if I could get away from that influence in my life, a teacher, if I could get away from my parents. Did you guys think that when you were kids? Man, if I could just traded my parents for some decent ones, I'd be on a roll. And we start to think, if I could change something out here, I'd be like Jesus. That's the lowest level of change that ever happens. And by the way, we have to change environments. So there's nothing wrong with it, but understand where it is. And then when we do that, then we start looking. So now this has changed. And I've seen people say, man, I won't use the language that was told me, but I had a person look at me and say, I'm going to get out of this bleepity-bleep valley. And I'm moving somewhere else, and I'm going to make something. You know what they were changing? Environment. You know what they found out when they got to that place? Guess who showed up? They did. So there's times environment needs to change. And then we go to behavior, and it's like, man, we look at stuff inside of us and we say, man, why am I the way I am? Like, why? And we identify areas of behavior, and pretty soon we target them like, man, here's the problem with it. Some of you have enough self-will and motivation that you can go through behavior change without ever being plugged into the life of Jesus. That's temporary stuff. And then we go limitations. Limitations is just that, I call it the thermostat of the soul. And it's like when I moved to the south, and we don't have it out here because our hot season is so short, but when I moved from northern Michigan to Florida, they had air conditioning in their houses. And you know how that works. The heat goes up, and at a certain point, the thermostat kicks on the air conditioning and lowers it. There's this thing inside us. And maybe some of you don't identify this. I do. We're in this process of trying to get traction in my life. It's like I would go so far, and then bam, somewhere I hit something. And I'd lose it. Does that make sense? The thermostat of the soul. And then beliefs. And beliefs are not what we say. It's how we live. So when people look at us, you live out what you believe. So what you believe to be true about him and you will live out. So when someone looks at you, what do they think you believe? It's not thoughts. A lot of our thoughts we think are beliefs. Thoughts are thoughts. Thoughts can be changed quickly. Beliefs can't. Beliefs are a process to change. Thoughts, you can change my mind this morning about something if you're convincing enough. I'll leave here believing when I came in here, unless there's revelation. Information changes thoughts. Revelation changes beliefs. Remember, and then identity, highest level. This we don't do so much for ourselves. It's when that moment when Jesus reminds you who you really are. Now, here's why I bring this list up. In this thing of becoming like Jesus, I believe for a long time if I could have behavior correction, I'm like him. And I said a couple Sundays when I actually talked about this process, that when you start from religion starts from the bottom and pushes up. Jesus will always start at the top and push down. So know this, in your journey to become like him, he's going to start at your identity. And then he's going to move to your beliefs. And then he's going to deal with the limitations that are somehow worked your way into your soul in such a way. You could call them strongholds, you could call them whatever, that need to be broke through so that you can, that what you know, what is true about yourself actually works its way down, and then you get to the behavior thing. So I just want to bring that up because in my conversations with God, I talk to him a lot about the bottom too. And those conversations just go like this. God, what do you want? Where do you want me? And what do you want me to do? That's talking to him on the environment and behavior level. And I kept thinking I wasn't hearing from him, going back to our talk a couple of weeks ago. You know why I wasn't hearing from him? One, I didn't train myself. We'll get to that if we ever get to hearing part 2. I'm still working on that talk. Still got some things to try to think through. Here's why I think mostly, because you know what he wanted to talk to me about? Identity and beliefs. I'm conversing with him on this level, and he's saying, you know what I really want to tell you? Who I am and who you are because of me. And who you are as a person who's plugged into my life and my peace and my power and all of who I am. So he was trying to talk to me on identity and beliefs, and I was showing up and saying, what do I do today? Well, maybe that comes out of who I am. And what if I don't know who I am? So does that give us a little bit of a setup? Let's talk about just 3 things then. And this, from these verses. I mentioned to you last week, one of the reasons I really feel that I got stuck, and I think Christians can get stuck in their journey with Jesus, is this issue right here. We have this tendency to want God to do, so in this salvation, in this transformation thing, the best I understand it, and by the way, I'm going to say this again, I've said it for 2 weeks in a row, I'm going to say it again. If I teach this a year from now, it'll be different. Because I'm really thinking that God's going to lead me and show me stuff that I don't know now about it. So this is this year's talk on this. If you don't like it, show up next year. You have in this salvation thing, God's part, our part. So God does his part, we do, and then we have our part to do. So that makes sense, right? Like he doesn't do all of it. And by the way, he does all the hard work. We get all the easy work. You might think it's tough trying to be like Jesus. I promise you, he did the hard work for you. He transferred you out of the kingdom of darkness, got you in the kingdom of light. That's the hard part. He planted his nature, and he did so he does the hard work. He's working in. But let me just say this before I start to take apart these 2 ideas. The working in, working out. I think we get stuck because we try to do God's part, and we ask God in our prayer life. Think about your prayer life. How many times you ask God to do your part? No, I'm not going to go on that little rabbit trail right now. Man, I catch myself saying, are you kidding me? I asked you to do what? That's not even your part in this partnership or this whatever it is that we call this thing. That's not even your part, it's my part. And I'm asking you to do it. Doesn't work. And it also is a disaster when I try to do his part. So let's think in the idea of transformation. What's God's part? What's our part? 3 areas. Paul, when he writes to the Philippians in that verse, he says, here's what God's doing. Here's God's part. He's working in you. Now, I don't know. I'm not a Greek scholar, so it's always refreshing when I get to talk and Alex is nowhere around. Because he's probably looking at me like, dude, you so missed it. Anyhow, he's not here. I know a couple of Greek words, though. But this idea of working in is just this. He's working. The best way we could kind of bring this, it's oversimplifying it just a little bit, but the idea that God's working in you, this is how intent he is, to see you transformed and to show his glorious image to a broken world. When it says he's working in, what that idea is, he's working overtime. It's not a 40-hour-a-week gig for him in your life. Like what he has to do to get you what is he working in? His nature. He brings it. We think about what he works inside of us. He gives us his mind. He gives us his nature. His DNA is planted inside of us. So the whole notion of us being born again is that his genes are just stamped inside of you. Like he stamps his nature into your spirit. You don't ever have to pray that. God, would you give me your nature? You got it. Quit praying it. Just maybe the prayer needs to be to shift and say, God, I don't even know how to live this out or how to even think about it. But I know this. And this is where your beliefs start to shape. Your identity and belief will eventually shape your behavior once you get a handle on what he stamped inside of you. And how passionate he is. Like working overtime so that you understand you carry his nature. You carry his mind. You carry all of him. You talk about freedom, right there it is. He's working in. What is he working in you? The desire and the power. Desire. The word, when Paul wrote this, in the Greek language, there's 2 words. I'm going to take a shot at them. The one feels like it should be called. By the way, if you want to impress somebody that's not here, just throw this at them. They might think you're speaking in tongues or doing something weird. It's the word is boulomai. He had another option. He could have used the word thelo. 2 possibilities for the desire concept in the Greek. Boulomai means this. Listen to this. Boulomai is this. Having the desire and never following through. I'm never going to do that again. I am so tired of getting caught in the same addiction, in the same mess, in the same relational junk, in the same whatever it is in my life. I'm never going to do it again. And guess what we do? Boulomai. Go on, do it again. It's not the word he uses. What God is working overtime inside of you is to give you the desire. It's not boulomai, it's thelo, which means he's planted a dream, a passion, a vision of who you could be in him, and he's given you the stamina to follow through and live it out. That's just fantastic. He's working overtime so that you can get it. It's who he wants you to be. It's who you can be. Let me rephrase it. It's not who you can be, it's who you are. The desire, and not only the desire, but the power to actually pull it off. Plugged into his power source, he's working in. My part is to work it out. And then Paul, in that verse, he says this at the end of the verse. he uses another in the translation I asked. We have another work on our part. So his part is to work it in. His part is to work in the desire and the power so that you can become like Jesus. That new nature actually lives its way out so that the people around you say, you're something different about you. Working it out is the actual word is distribution. I remember some years ago, and this is rewinding the clock, actually quite a few years ago, a guy moved out here from back east, and some of you still know this guy, so I'm not going to, and since then he's moved on. He's moved to I think he's in the northern part of the state. But it was interesting. Didn't know anything about this guy. I learned to know him, spent some time hanging around. I was back east with him and just talking about the stuff of his life with him. I was back east because both of our families are from back east, the majority of them. And so we ended up in an area near where this guy moved from. And I had a person come up to me and say, "What's going on with him?" I said, "What do you mean?" It had been about 5, 6, 7 years since he had left that area, and they're like, he came back and he was so different. The whole family was like, what? See, what distribution actually is the nature of Jesus is so embedded inside of you, and you've locked in, and your belief system is shaped around who you are in such a way that the people around you should eventually say, what is happening inside of you? You're not that grumpy person anymore. You're not that sarcastic, bitter, or whatever. Like, you are different. Working in, working out. Let's go to the next one. I want to say this for anybody who had a really tough week. One of the things I'm realizing the longer I walk with Jesus, man, I want to be really careful how I say this. But my understanding of this process, if you think about it as a process, is I really put way too much pressure on myself. And I think that I really don't understand his grace in the moment like I should. And let me think of, I think God started to get my attention by the grandkids that showed up at the house this way. You know, you get them and they're kind of small and they just whatever. And then, okay, I could have said that better. It's so interesting. At one point, they decide they're going to try to walk. Isn't that? And you watch that process. And Wyatt right now is at the point where it was fun watching Grant. It was fun watching Adelaide. Grant did it really young. It felt like way younger than he should have. And he's up walking around. And Wyatt's just kind of a big kid, so he's probably going to. I don't know. Anyhow. All right. Here's what's interesting. When they start to actually walk, I would describe that as controlled falling. Isn't it? It's not walking. You know what I never heard anybody say? Figure it out, kid. But that's what I do for myself. See, the deal is God has no expectations that he's going to deposit his nature inside of you and you get it right away. Do you understand that? He doesn't enroll you in a perfection program. He enrolls you in a training program that you're going to have controlled falling, and then you're going to have, but it's a process. And while we never anticipate that for our kids in a natural world, we expect that out of new believers. We have that in expectations for ourselves that if somewhere I missed it, and it's shame and all of that. Okay, so you understand why I say be careful how you think about that. Don't go on and Paul says, do you continue in sin just because no, you don't. That identity that works its way down into the belief system and eventually deals with the limitations you have in your heart will eventually change your behavior, and behavior matters. We're representing him. It matters. But all I'm saying is this. He's enrolled you in a training program. Be okay with that. What I'd say about my part then is quit. You may have royally screwed up last week. Do you really believe that you can be a person who in your world, in your area of influence, can someday, maybe much sooner than you imagine, be a person who shares his glorious image with the people around you, and they look at you and say, what? You're different. It couldn't be you, because I've seen you too many years. Somebody has to be working inside of you. All I'm going to say about this before I go to the last one is we really need to have the humility to fail and to get back up and say, I'm going again. You will not keep me down because of last week. I'm going to get back up. And I'm once again going to remind myself who he is and who I am as his child. And I'm going to live that. I need to just check where I am because it feels like this thing's not working correctly. I have a couple minutes yet. Let me get this finished up. Working in, working out. God's part he works in. Our part we work it out. We distribute it. I could go on about this, so let me just say this. We're his outpost. We're his outpost here. Work it out. This is the only gig he has, you and I. He's not going to show up. He's going to show up through us. Training program. He's going to enroll you in his training program. He has no expectations you're going to nail it the first day. He has no expectations you're going to nail it the first year, but he wants you to stay, to have the humility to say, I failed, I'm coming back, and I'm going to do it. Again, do not quit. And don't ever settle. I tell you, the thermometer on the soul is real. And there's probably some of you here believe, as you look around, as I believed, that stuff is for that person because that person has some special connection with Jesus that I don't have. And I can never be that. Oh, just let him work in and you start to distribute it and let him change your beliefs and the limitations that keep you stuck. Watch him win that one. This one. Here's why this one is on the God's part side. Here's why this one is. Let me say it this way. Let me just back up and say it this way. I think there's people here that know this one so much better than me. It's almost awkward for me to talk about this. But what I'm talking about is, please don't miss how much you need the Holy Spirit. See, he didn't just plug you into, he just didn't transfer you from here to here. He placed inside of you a power source. Now let me just say a few things about that. Because this is one of those topics that could, we've seen the good, bad, and the ugly of it. And so we tend to focus on the ugly. And for years I was like, there's a bunch of weirdies out there. Right? And I stayed away from the power source. How was I ever going to win? If you look at the book of Acts, chapter 2, you have this thing that happens. And most of you know about that. So these guys who are, and they have, the Spirit just captures them differently and then fills them in ways that was just, guess what happened in chapter 4? Same thing. Here's why I remind you of that. Whatever experience you had yesterday isn't going to cut it for today. Go back and say, I need you today. So it's this thing, and that it's this, and when I talk about the Holy Spirit, I just wanted to say this before I go to the other side, the waiting part. I want to say this. This is not facts to be discovered. This is a presence to be lived with. Because it's possible to know every detail about him and not be close to him. I want to take you to a scene that I think is so cool. And I want to wrap this up with this idea. One of the things that happened to that group of guys, because they had followed Jesus for 3 years, and then they went through the 3+ years, and they went through all the things that happened near the end of Jesus' life, and eventually they're back out fishing, kind of back out doing whatever those guys did, and it just feels like to me what was going on is they're like, you know what, man, that was kind of cool and all that, but man, and then Jesus meets with them, and they have these moments together, but before he leaves, he looks at him and he says this, I want you to wait here. Don't do anything more until you understand, until you receive, let me say it that way, receive this power source inside of you. Don't do anything. Stay right here. Wait. Because it's there's always this temptation to, oh, we met with Jesus, let's go do something, and let's get out and let's charge into something. And one of the things that I've had to do in my own journey with this whole spirit thing is just this. I'm just gonna wait. Man, I blow this one as much as anybody. So even as I say this, don't look at me. Don't come to me how this works. And I'm going to wait with no expectations, except that I know you want to fill me. I know that. All of me. For today. And it's probably why I start my day the way I do. I just try to quiet myself and say, I know this. I can go off the rail with anybody out there unless I have you. And till I have clarity, till I have direction, till I have that power, and because I have a longing at this point in my life, because I joke about last night I was at a birthday party for a guy that was 70, and I'm staring at him like, dude, how did you ever get to this point? And we have this interesting, the end of the runway's out there somewhere for me. I want to make sure that this last push is all about his power, not my junk. and all about his gifts and all about the fruit of, because if I'm soaking in the atmosphere of the kingdom, I'll bring that to a brokenness. Especially when I'm connected well to the power source. And so I want to wrap this up. And when I say no expectations, because all of us come here needing something a little bit different. In a general sense, we need him. In a general sense, we need power. In a general sense. But I want us to wrap this time up, because there's a couple of things that Jesus said that I turned back to in this, as I was thinking about this series. I turned back to, he looked at a broken woman and he said, if you only knew who you were talking to, if you just knew, if you had any idea what I could offer you, I would love to do that for you. So what is it that you need from him? For some, and when I say no expectations, I really have come to believe this. I don't know if I'll believe this in a year from now. That's why I say this is now. I'm learning a lot of this stuff on the fly. I really have come to believe that he tailor makes it for you. Because we tend to go to situations and images and pictures and say, well, if he fills me, it's going to be this way. It might be, it might not. It might look different for you. So as we wrap this up, what do you need from him? And are you willing to just sit here and wait and say, till I get that clarity, till I receive from you, till I know that I know, I'm willing to just wait. So for some of you, you need physical healing. Wait. Don't rush into something, just wait. Because he wants to meet you there. For some of you, it's emotional healing. You walk in here and you've been raised in situations, or you come through life. I've heard some of your stories. He wants to heal you emotionally. For some of you, it may be as simple as he wants to turn your selfishness into generosity. I promise you, if you have a really selfish nature and he makes you a generous person, that's his spirit at work in you. That's what he does. He shows up. For some of you, you might have walked in here and you're just tired. You're tired because you got beat. You feel that way. Maybe you're tired because you think you tried and it just doesn't feel like it works. I promise you, he wants to work in you so that you have the power and the energy to represent him here. So it might just be waiting to say, I'm not going to do anything more until I feel that power surging in me and that energy, because I'm tired. Some of you, you're disappointed and you need hope. For some of you, you've taken some big losses. And you just need the strength to say, I'm not quitting. I won't quit. Wait for him. He's going to fill you. If you open yourself, he'll come. And maybe for some of you, you're just really dry. And it's been a long time since you thought about Jesus and was excited. I'm convinced in my own journey That when I lose interest in him, it's because I'm not, I know this. When I lose interest in him, it's because my view of him, my belief system is tweaked in a way that I don't get who he really is. Because he's a fantastic Jesus. Mel, would you come? Even as Mel comes and closes this out, so wherever you are, just say, Jesus, here's where I really need you, that power source to show up. And don't be surprised when he does, because he's really good at that. And remind yourself of who you are. You're being transformed. You're made like Jesus so that you can show his glorious image to the people in your world. And just receive that this morning and live in it. And leave here with a hope and excitement of what he's going to do through you this week.